Good evening. This is Chris, and this is jamplay.com, and we are in the middle of a series, a live course called Fretboard Roadmap. And what we've been doing over the course of this course is exploring the possibilities in the key of G all up and down the neck using 3-string scales. The beauty of 3-string scales is that the patterns allow you to work up the neck in a very sequential and somewhat linear way. So they're really helpful for learning your notes, exploring, improving your technique, and training your ears while playing over different tonal centers. So we've spent a lot of time with our ears and discovering what it sounds like to play something in the key of G with a tonal center of A. In the key of G with a tonal center of C, for example. Last week we did in the key of G with a tonal center of a key of D. This week we are on E. And every week what we've done is we have introduced the scale pattern, then we've introduced a sequence. And these sequences are interchangeable with all the scales, but we've assigned sort of a new sequence or a new way to play the scale with every one of the patterns. And then we practice, we do an abbreviated drilling over the pattern to a click, and then we play with the drone track with no click, and we just experiment with, okay, how does this sound over the drone track, over the tonal center? So in this case, we're playing in the key of G, we're starting on E, and we're playing over a drone track that is on E. So we're training our ear to get used to what it sounds like to play in the key of G over a different tonal center. This week is a very familiar sound because E is the relative minor of G. So we've heard this all our lives. Also, the sequence this week is, it's a great way to play 3-string scales. One might say it's a bit simpler than some of the other ones we've worked on, but it's a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started on the scale. Before I actually go through it, are there any comments or questions from last week, about last week, or about anything? No? All right. Here's the scale. We're starting on the 12th fret, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15. Then we have 12, 14, 16, 12, 14, 16. So 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 16, 12, 14, 16. With it being this far up on the neck, this pattern, you know, I will interchange this fingering for this fingering quite a bit. But I will not do that so much if I'm playing it, say, down here. It's just more of a reach. So you should be able to do both. Do what's comfortable up here, but bear in mind that fingering is always going to change. And fingering only goes so far when you're learning scale patterns, because when you actually play them for real, and you're phrasing and you're playing them in a less scalier mode, it just doesn't matter. Like, you use the fingering that you need to phrase the way you want to phrase. Then we have 13, 15, 17, and then 14, 15, 17. Okay, all the way up slowly. One more time. Chris, could I get just a touch more guitar in the monitor? More of everything. That's good. One more time. And back down. What's neat about every single one of these patterns is they've all got repetition in them in terms of finger patterns. They've all got this, they've all got that in there somewhere. This one, it happens over the B and the G, and so you have this shift. What's neat is when you look at stuff like this, certain shapes begin to stand out within the context of the scale. So for improvising, you have these notes available. And I'll revisit that later when we're playing over the drone. That's a very interesting sound. Certainly not something that you would consider to be, you know, normal over an E minor sound, but it is part of scale. Those notes are there. And so capitalizing on some of that stuff can be a really cool way to improvise, sort of seeing those shapes outlined in the scale, even if they have nothing to do with a chord or anything, you just happen to see them. Here it is, up and down several times slow. All right, let's pull out our favorite toy, the metronome. Hopefully you are starting to get more and more comfortable with the metronome. We'll start at 80. One, two, three, four, 2, 2, 3, 4. Go to 90. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 100. One, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. One, 10. 1, 2, 3. 4. Oops. And 130. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. And why not 140? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, obviously, there's you could keep going, but as you can see, you know, when I started to speed up there were times where I, you know, had brain lapses or didn't play things correctly, and in my drill process, and I've done this in previous weeks, you'd back that up. You know, you'd back that up to 135 and play it a couple times well at 135, and then play it up at 140. Although I was able to correct most of the mistakes, and I felt like in general, I wasn't tensing up. I felt good about what my body was doing and the overall cleanliness of my playing. And if you can say that, then you're playing at a good tempo. If you are repeatedly making mistakes, you're starting to tense up, then you've passed your speed threshold, and you want to slow it back down and then work back up to that point. Okay. Let's if there are no questions or comments, let's move on to the sequence.
Got one question here.
Yeah.
It's from Wayne.
Hi, Wayne.
And his question is, if you're running out of frets, can't that be played in open position?
Yeah, it can. It's much harder when you're playing with open strings. Part of the drilling of the 300 strings is that we're not using open strings. You certainly can. It's just a very, very different feel. I don't know why you'd be at this point running out of frets. That most guitars should have that fret number. It's 12, 15, 17th. That's the 17th fret. There aren't a lot of guitars that don't have 17 frets. Although maybe if you're playing on an acoustic without a cutaway, it's hard to reach that 17th fret. I would still try. The essence of the sequencing that we're doing and the scale patterns are sort of designed not to include open strings. It's certainly a good one to learn and utilize open if you want to. But it's just a very different feel. Good question though. And any of these can be moved around anywhere, really. I mean, that's the cool part about 300 string scales, that you're going to see that when we in the end weeks, when we go and we play over different tonal centers. We're going to be moving some of these patterns around a little bit. So.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
Okay. Here's the sequence. The sequence is pretty straightforward. It's similar to one of the ones we've done before, except for a bit more direct. We are going to ascend the string, or descend the string as we ascend the scale, and we're going to ascend the string as we descend the scale. So it's, like I said, it's straightforward, but it's a cool way to phrase. Here it is. Stop there or here, depending on what you want your tonal center to feel like. We've done this before with one of our scale sequences down here. But it was in a pattern of 4. This time we're maintaining the pattern of 3. Oops. Really nice sound. Let's drill that with the click. We'll go ahead and start at 100 this time. One, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we've got the scale, we've got the sequence, and the next step that we have been running into over the past several weeks is that we go to the drone here and we pay careful attention in our minds, and sometimes we vocalize it. I'm going to be vocalizing it out loud just to help you sort of hear my train of thought as to what notes we're playing. This is going to help us learn the fretboard, memorize notes, but it's also going to help us become conscious of, well, how does C sound over an E tonal center? How does G sound over an E tonal center? You get used to how each one of these tones sounds over different tonal centers, and it's extremely fun. So we're going to go to the drone. You can start by playing scalier, and then you can start to sort of just do whatever you want, start to phrase a little bit, realizing you don't have tempo as a constraint. The goal with the drone track, as we've said the past several weeks, is that you want to be able to say the notes, hear the notes, visualize the notes. You're making connections between your eyes, your hands, and your ears, and you're training yourself to understand how those different notes sound over different tonal centers. Sound. We do a D, E, F sharp, A, and then go to the G, which is that third, so it's a strong note. That's really fun about this particular pattern is you can use it as an extension of the minor pentatonic. And I haven't done this with any of the other scales, but this one, because it's more familiar tonally, I think you can do fairly easily. If I play over the drone, the scale first, and then I play, and then I ascend the pentatonic scale, flavor to your pentatonic scale by blending the two. And improvising over the track will be especially fun in that regard. But I'm gonna play a little bit more over the drone, combine some of those ideas. Oh, the other thing I was gonna show you too, we discussed this earlier. Those notes being in the scale, what could we do with those notes? How can we resolve those notes? This F sharp, that's a pretty eerie note over an E. It's the 2. Repeat that a bunch of times and it becomes something kind of cool. So next we move to the track. This is the second to last week that we'll be doing the track with the scale patterns. Meaning, after that, we don't learn any more new scale patterns. We just start to join scale patterns together. Any questions or comments?
We have a few here.
Okay.
This one is from Buck Who over on YouTube. Can you use this in blues?
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to find that over most blues progressions that you're going to want to combine it with a blues scale, because the blues scale has a bit more blurred lines when it comes to tonalities. The blues scale includes the minor and the major third and the flat 5. So this might feel a bit limiting if you're using this exclusively over blues, but you can absolutely use the minor scale over blues.
Okay, and the next one is from Mage Murray. If the drone pedal tone changed to G, would we be back on Ionian?
Yes. As long as you emphasize the right notes. But I did not answer that question because it was a question directly related to modes. Yeah, you have to make sure and change the way you think about it too. It's not just about the tonal center. It's in terms of what you're playing over. It's about thinking that that is the tonal center. And I'm glad you brought this up, because this is exactly what we're going to be demonstrating, not next week, but the week after, when we start combining the scales over the key of G, or over a G tonal center. So in other words, we'll be playing this pattern over a G tonal center. We'll be playing the starting on A over a G tonal center. And when you start improvising over those, it does really begin to sound all like G, as long as you're maintaining in your playing and your phrasing that you're starting on G.
Okay, that's our questions for right now.
Okay, cool. Here is the track. So utilizing some pentatonic scale in addition to that. there you go. There's some not so concrete demonstrations of how you can apply that scale, the scale sequence, as well as sort of join what we're doing with the pentatonic scale. And there's ways you can do that, and we're going to be covering more of that in the following weeks. But there's ways that you can join these scale patterns with other things that you know. Chords that lie within the pattern. Pieces of the pattern that end up making little tiny licks or riffs will point to other shapes that you may have learned in other scales. And so we're going to be going over quite a bit of that in the following weeks. Are there any other questions or comments about this week or any of the other weeks? Or maybe technique. Maybe as you're working through some of the sequences, how's consecutive picking going? How's some of the legato techniques that we've worked on in some of the other sequences going?
Here's one from Mage Murray again. Does it fit into a jam session to then drop down an octave and repeat? I like to do this in practice, but wonder if it would work in a jam improv.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and this was really the first scale that we've done where you've got that octave sort of relationship, Yeah, a lot of cool possibilities there.
I think I would maybe stay away from that low C if it were just me. That's just my.
Sure.
It seems to cloud it a little bit. Just
Yeah.
The low C on the 3rd fret there.
Yep. Yep, absolutely it does. One of the things that is interesting about this is every single one of these notes works down there. And you saw me using that a little bit. So if you've got this scale position, you've got the pentatonic, you've also got those down here. You've got these open strings, and you saw me demonstrating it a little bit there, where you've got this. And there's all sorts of, Satriani does some cool stuff. That sounds like it's in G, but as soon as you put the tonal center over it, Any other questions?
Okay, I think we're caught up on questions.
Cool. All right, so next week, giving you a little bit of a preview from next week, we are going to tackle starting on F sharp. And I want you to prepare a little bit for this one. Have fun with E, because E is extremely straightforward sounding, extremely familiar. Starting on F sharp is not familiar at all. And it's very, very difficult to play tonally over F sharp, as you'll see. So have fun with E. Then in week 8, and this is some of your questions were directed towards this. In week 8, we spend some time connecting the patterns. So we're going to be playing over a G tonal center the whole time, but we're going to be working all the way up and down the neck using all the patterns that we know. We're not going to be worrying about sequencing just yet. We're going to choose sequences in the following week and drill those. But the idea is that we're going to learn how to maybe go up one, down the other, down one, up the other, work all the way up and down the neck, understand that you're playing in the key of G. This is where you really start to see, when you start joining the patterns together, how powerful they can be and how you can just kind of go all over the neck without limitation. It's really quite fun. Then in week 9, we do the sequencing grab bag, where we're doing the same thing we do in week 8, except for we're going to be focusing on the sequences. And then finally, week 10, we do a combination of both, but we're also going to be grabbing from all the other different tracks. So now let's connect all the patterns and play over a tonal center of A. Now let's grab all the patterns or all the sequences and play over a tonal center of D. And pretty soon you start to understand and get a feel for, wow, I can play all over the neck with any tonal center in the key of G. Really, you can do it in any key. So there's a lot of empowerment that's going to happen over the next several weeks. Any other comments or questions before we sign off for the night?
It would appear that's it. Thanks to everyone for joining in tonight.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, everyone, we'll see you next week for starting on F sharp.